Parents generate core levels of dreams for their children even before the child is born or adopted. Disability unfortunately shatters those dreams. Grieving is the process whereby parents separate those shattered dreams and begin creating new dreams, by Dr. Ken Moses. The grieving process you may experience when your child is diagnosed is different from the grief you feel when someone close to you dies. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Give It a Voice here at the Voice of Hope Media with A. Simbeng. If this is your first time watching this show, I am AC. I am an autism mom, an autism advocate, and an autism ambassador. And I'm also an author of a book called Grief to Greed. And again, I'm the host here at the Voice of Hope Media. Here at the Voice of Hope Media, we give a voice to those societal issues often regarded as too emotional, too taboo, too sensitive to talk about in public. We educate, we empower, we inspire, and we give hope to individuals facing challenging and complex life issues, including special educational needs, so that these individuals will be able to draw inspiration and be able to speak up, speak out, knowing they will be heard and they won't be judged or stigmatized. So, you are welcome to our show today. I'm the host today and I don't have any guests. So, our topic of discussion today is on parenting, the grief that special needs parents face when they are parenting their special needs children. So, we are giving a voice to accepting and embracing your special needs child, where we will be discussing the stages of grief of special needs. If you are just joining in, you are tuned onto our Facebook page, The Voice of Hope Media, and also our YouTube channel, The Voice of Hope Media. Once more, you are welcome. And if you're just joining in, share, invite your friends to watch. And I always say, each time you watch an episode of this show, you learn, you unlearn, you relearn, and you learn again something new, because we aim to educate, we aim to empower, to inspire, and to give hope to everyone who has faced some life challenging issues. We also encourage people to share their experiences so that they know that they will be heard and they won't be judged or stigmatized. So, once more, our topic of discussion today is accepting and embracing our special needs children, where we will be discussing the stages of grief that special needs parents go through when they've received that diagnosis or when something tragic has happened. In this case, we are not discussing death, because I know that oftentimes when we hear about grief, what comes to mind first and foremost is death. So we are not talking about grief in terms of death. We are talking about grief when parenting a child who has special needs. So, for clarification purposes, let me just say what special needs is. Special needs are people who need special help or special care. For example, because they may be having a disability. And then special needs can range from people with autism, people with Asperger's syndrome, people with Down syndrome, people with ADHD, cystic fibrosis, and it could also include people who have um, cleft palates or problems with communication or hearing problems, even people with cerebral palsy. These are people classified as special needs individuals. Now, nearly 15% of people in the world have a disability. And until you have a child with special needs, there are certain things you will never understand. You have no idea of the depth of your strength as a parent. You have no idea of your tenacity and your resourcefulness when you are a parent of a child with a disability or with special needs. And until you've been in this shoe, it's very difficult for you to understand. I know it is not an easy journey for any of you who has joined today. If you are the parent of a special needs child, I know that it is not an easy journey with your special needs. There are days where I feel like giving up as well, but what comes to mind is that there is hope. There is that light at the end of the tunnel, and you can't possibly give up when you turn around and you look at your special needs child. If you're just joining in and you're still wondering why I'm talking about special needs or special needs children or parenting special needs children, as I earlier mentioned, I am an autism mom, which means I've got a child who is autistic and who also has other forms of disabilities. So I thought it wise to bring this topic today for us to discuss, because this is a very important topic as far as parents with special needs children are concerned. This topic, grieving special needs children or accepting and embracing our children, is a vital one. It requires us to have an understanding. Like I said a few days ago, going through this process is not rocket science. It doesn't take a day to accept your child, it doesn't take a month to embrace your journey. It is not linear. It is not a straightforward journey, but it is a process. It is achievable and it is possible if you put yourself into it and you look into what you are going through. It's possible to get to that level of acceptance. It's possible to get to that level of embracing. Yes, I am one of those. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in, for watching, and then listening. If you think this show, this discussion today is going to help someone out there, please share and invite your friends to watch as well. Here at the Voice of Hope Media, we give a voice to those issues often considered as too emotional, too sensitive, or even those taboo topics that people don't feel comfortable talking about them in public. But at the same time, these are issues, these are societal issues happening to to human beings, to people, to your neighbors, to your brothers, to your sister, to your family members, and even to your friends. So we welcome you once more. If you have any question, put them down, ask your question. Either I will be able to answer them while on the show today, or maybe I will be able to, if I can't answer the question, there are experts on this show. There are people, specialists who are associated to this show who can come later on and answer your questions. Or there's also a phone number which you can equally WhatsApp to get further clarifications for your question. So thank you once more um, for watching. So we encourage you to stay tuned, because we are going to talk about embracing we are going to talk about accepting and embracing your child with special needs. And as this happens, you as a parent, you have to go through certain stages. They call them stages of grief for special needs parenting. So stay tuned and I'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the Voice of Hope Media with myself, A. Simbeng, as the host. And our topic of discussion today is accepting and embracing your special needs child. I've already explained what a special needs child is, or special needs person is, and some examples. So if your child is autistic, has Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, or a child that has some form of a disability or needs some extra care or extra help, he or she is regarded as a special needs child. As a parent of a special needs child, over the years, many people have asked me, how do you remain strong? How do you cope on a daily basis? How do you do it generally? How do you go through some of these challenges and then you are still able to have that smile on your face? Sometimes I don't really know how to answer the question. Sometimes I just smile again, but I know that there's a God up there whereby when He puts you in a situation, when He puts you through a challenge, He doesn't leave you there. He gives you a roadmap. He shows you the way. And some of those are the ability to be gritty, to have resilience, to be courageous, to be patient, etc., etc. For me, I had to grieve my child, it was even though he was alive. It didn't start at the beginning. I didn't realize at the beginning that I had to grieve. So over the years, it had to take the physical loss of a child, of another child, for me to realize that all these emotions I have been going through, they were actually grief, and that there's that necessity for us to grieve when we've had that diagnosis, whether it's a diagnosis of autism, or diagnosis of Down syndrome. In this journey, I've actually discovered that parents of children with autism, especially, their grief journey does not usually start at the beginning. It does not start at the same time. You have some of those parents who have whose children started developing normally, and they started achieving their milestones from the beginning. They started walking, they started talking, they started doing some of those things that you would expect a child at a certain age to be able to do. And then at some point they stop and they regress. And then you also have another parent like myself whose child was born already with some complications from birth. So at that point, there's already that expectation that there is going to be some form of a delay as the child is growing up. So in that case, the grief stage now starts with a gradual understanding of what is happening, and then leading at some point to that level of acceptance, to that stage of embracing. But for a parent whom suddenly a child stops talking, a child maybe stops doing whatever thing he or she was doing before and regresses, this comes as a shock to their system. Most of these parents, they struggle a little bit more than a child, than a parent who was initially, or who had been expecting that there was going to be some form of a delay at some point. However, there is still that grief. This grief process still happens. I'm so sorry for the noise that you hear in the background. That is my son, the one I am talking about. So he's watching his program, and unfortunately, when he's watching, he's making his sounds of what he is watching. I do appreciate each and every one of you watching today. So, when you've received that shocking news of diagnosis, or maybe your child has had an accident, and there's that long term, and there's that message that you've been given by the doctors that maybe your child is going to have a disability in the long run. First of all, there is that loss of you as a parent. You go through the loss of expectations for your child. You expect, there are obviously expectations of what your child was supposed to be doing at a certain age, at a certain time. There is also that loss for yourself, loss of yourself as a parent. Probably you have to make a huge decision to walk away or to abandon some of those projects you were already working on before having a child with a disability, because you need absolute enough time to be able to support your child. During this process, or during this journey, some people lose their health, maybe partly due to the stress of being a caregiver, whereas others lose friendships, others lose professional relationships, and even family relationships. And this happens because over time, emotional, even physical, physical activities that happen around you, or even emotionally, at times you can't really connect with people. So as you are in this journey, you tend to lose some of those things. You may suffer for the on the loss of your own self. You suffer the loss of friendships or family members. Some family members, when they cannot understand, when they cannot understand the situation you are in or the situation in which your family is in, they will go away. They will go somewhere where they will feel more comfortable, or where they think they don't want to get too involved in your own stress or in your own ups and downs. So that is how it starts. But looking briefly, if we have to break down some of those stages of grief, usually when we hear of stages of grief, I always think of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, whose stages of grief of DAPDA, which is denial, anger, bargaining, um, acceptance, and depression. So we always hear of this. Oftentimes people think these stages of grief are only associated to when you've lost a loved one. Stages of grief, these are emotions that we experience when we've either had experienced the loss of a loved one. It may be through death, the loss of a job, or the loss of an income. It may be a major rejection. It may be the end of a relationship or a divorce. It may be someone who has gone into drug addiction. It may be infertility. You also grieve that loss. It may actually be just minor losses, or of maybe a job, etc., or the loss of a huge amount of money. It will be surprising actually to know that we all went through, or we have all experienced these stages of grief during the pandemic. Let me give an example. There at the beginning, when it was announced that there's a virus, that there's a pandemic coming up, we were all in denial. Yeah. If you are watching and you think about it, you will know that most of us were in denial. Because why were we in denial? We had the thought that this virus will not affect us, especially those of the Black and ethnic minority groups, or Africans. We knew that we are Africans and that the virus cannot affect us, that we wouldn't be affected. That was the stage of denial when when the virus at when the virus came. Then anger. We were angry because as a result of the pandemic, as a result of COVID, we were all made to stay home, and we were all made to reduce some of our activities that we used to enjoy going out there doing. So we were angry with the virus, angry maybe with policymakers, or maybe with the government, etc., etc. And then at some point, as we kept going down the stages of grief of the pandemic, we started bargaining. So bargaining is actually trying to negotiate, trying to say, okay, if I social distance for maybe 1 day, 2 days, or 2 weeks, everything may be okay. It will be all right if I just stay at home. Then after that 1 week, or after that 1 month of lockdown, everything will be okay. That's where bargaining kicked in. And then if we look at depression now, in these stages, there was that sadness. Everyone was sad because we've been locked indoors. We've been angry. We've been denying the fact that the virus exists. So we were sad, and we were at that point where we were saying, "Oh God, I don't really know when this thing will ever end." And then finally accepting, even though not everybody would have accepted that the virus is real, but majority of us have accepted so far. So accepting that there is a virus is actually accepting that this is what is happening. This is our reality. So now we have to stay home at some point. We have to wear masks. We have to social distance. We have to wash our hands. So it's basically at this stage of acceptance, it's basically trying to figure out how to proceed. So acceptance is where the power lies. We find control in acceptance. Now we say, I can now wash my hands. right? I can keep a safe distance, and I can also learn to work virtually. Meanwhile, at the beginning, accepting was difficult because we all complained, we were all angry, we were all sad, we all bargained, and we didn't understand. We actually refused, we were denying that the virus cannot affect us. But eventually, we accepted our reality that the virus has actually, it may not have come to stay, but it's been here, it's almost 2 years. And so that's why I said acceptance. There is power in acceptance. Acceptance is when we find control. So bringing it now, bringing these stages of grief and relating them to parents of children with special needs. Yes, when you've received that diagnosis, when you've received that news at the beginning, you are in shock, you are in denial, because you say to yourself, this is not me, this cannot be my child. Why me? When you start, you're getting angry, you're angry with yourself, you're angry with your child, you're angry even with the medical professionals for giving you that diagnosis. And it is at this point of denial and anger that usually many parents go ahead to get a second or even a third opinion. So it comes in waves, it comes at different stages, and then we start bargaining as well. You get to that point where you start saying, maybe to God, God, please, if you could just make my child talk, if you could just make my child walk, if this, if that. We are kind of negotiating maybe with the supreme being, or we are struggling to find meaning. We are struggling to reach out to others just in case something else happen if we adjust things, because we've also been guilt tripping ourselves. We've also felt shame, and that anger for your child having a disability, or for that doctor or for that specialist to have given you that diagnosis. This is what happens, and then we get into that stage of depression where that sudden sadness kind of it kicks in. But at this moment, you are kind of sad, but at the same time trying to understand what's actually happening, understand what is actually going on at that moment. And then that's when you gradually get to the stage of depression, which I am going to not talk deeply about the denial, the anger, bargaining, depression, and anger, but I'm going to break this down to three different stages, three stages of grief for special needs parenting. In all of them, there is that aspect of the denial, the anger, the bargaining, the depression, and also acceptance. So these three stages of grief for special needs parent, which I really want each and every one of us to understand. First of all, you have mourning the fantasy. I actually watched a YouTube video a few days ago, and I saw some ladies discussing this. You have mourning the fantasy, you have accepting, and then you have embracing your child. So we will come back shortly to really talk more about what mourning your fantasy is when you are parenting a special needs child. We are going to look into what accepting your child looks like, what it feels like, and embracing your child with special needs. So just stay tuned. I'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the Voice of Hope Media with AC Mbeng, and today we are giving a voice to accepting and embracing your child with special needs. So, before we had that short break, I was talking about these special three stages of grief for special needs parent. First of all, you have mourning the fantasy. Whenever we know we are to have a baby entering our lives, we already begin to form a fantasy, right? We already start thinking of what that baby's life is going to be like, e.g., will my child be what my child will be able to look like, what he or she will be able to do. Will he be able to talk, will be able to walk, or to achieve their milestones at a certain age or at a certain time. We also think of what or how the child would even look like even before conceiving your child, or even before thinking if it's through adoption or any other form, or in any other method that you've had your child. We have all these fantasies in our minds. We think of what the child will look like, what the child will be in future, what they will be capable of doing. But when we get to that stage where we find out about a diagnosis, it may be traumatic birth, it may be a brain injury, it may be an accident. At this moment, there's that instant shock to our system. You are shocked. Why? Because this is not what you were expecting. You go into that state of fear, because you don't know the future, you don't know the outcome, because we fear sometimes because we don't know what is ahead of us. So, at this stage, when we mourn the fantasy of our child, we also, as parents, we mourn the fantasy of who we thought we were going to be and what our lives were going to look like. As parents, as a parent, also, even before having a child, my life or your life would have been carved out in a way where you already have an idea of what you will be doing in the next 5 or 10 years. Probably you're planning to go for further studies, maybe, or maybe you are actually fantasizing being the CEO in a certain big or major company. So, when we are mourning our fantasies at this stage of grief for special needs parenting, we do not only mourn the fantasies we had for our children, we also mourn the fantasies we had for ourselves. Because whether you like it or not, when you have a child with special needs, a parent without a child with special needs may take about 1 year to maybe achieve what they were planning to do. But a parent with a child who has special needs may take about 2 or 3 years or even 5 years in order to achieve what they had planned, or in order to get to that point of the fantasies, or what they were fantasizing, what they were going to be, or what they were going to do, or what they had planned for the rest of the world. It's all different, especially when it comes to parents of children with special needs. So this first stage I've talked about is actually it's mourning the fantasies. When you're mourning the fantasy, is they're the fantasies of what you thought your child was going to become, what he or she was going to be, what he or she was going to, how he or she was going to look like. And then you're also mourning your own fantasies of what you thought you were going to become, what you thought you were going to do in maybe in a couple of years. And then as you go through the mourning of the fantasies, you start getting to that point where you get to that acceptance level. Yes, the pain, the hardships, the hurts are real, but it is at this point of acceptance that choice plays a big part. Yes, there is choice in this journey. At some point, you have to choose whether to continue wailing or to accept the situation as it is and move forward. So, acceptance actually plays a very big part in this journey. So, when we are accepting, we have to choose. We have to either choose to see the light at the end of the tunnel, that there is beauty in this journey, or we can decide to stay in one place and continue mourning our fantasies, which we have mentioned earlier. This is very, very important. Many parents, many parents of special needs individuals or special needs children are still struggling or have struggled for a very long time without accepting their children because they've spent a long time mourning the fantasies of their child, mourning the fantasies of themselves, and forgetting to look at the situation at hand. So, accepting the situation actually is saying that this is it, this is what it is at the moment. It is being able to see what is happening in front of us, whether challenges with our kids, not being able to do the things we thought they were going to do, or not being able to have conversations with our kids as we fantasized before. Acceptance, it's basically saying that this is the life we have now. This is the life I have now. A life not without challenges, but a life that I'm going to accept it as it is and figuring out how to move forward without getting stuck at any one point. Many parents have got stuck. I almost got stuck at some point. But when I finally understood the journey, when I finally understood the purpose and tried to look at the light at the end of the journey, and when I learned that in your experience there's always a lesson, I stopped getting stuck and I looked for ways to move forward. And this comes with acceptance. Accepting the situation prevents us from constantly going down that route of self pity, not feeling enough or feeling broken or complaining all the times. Yes, it's normal. It's absolutely okay to go through these emotions when you are parenting a child with special needs. But all we have to do, we have to be very careful not to get stuck at any one time, because as a parent, once you get stuck, your child gets stuck. There is a delay in maybe interventions. There is a delay in almost every aspect of your life and also every aspect of your child's life. So there is power in acceptance. As I said above, when I was relating these stages of grief to to COVID. Yes, when you accept your reality, your life seems normal, even in the chaos. Your life will look okay, even though you are struggling. And it's in going through these stages, mourning your fantasies, accepting your child is accepting that, yes, I had these fantasies for my child. That's what I thought my child was going to be or going to do. But at the moment, that's not what he or she is doing. So I have to accept him or her the way he or she is and look for ways to help him and look for ways to help him improve, or look for, go out there, speak to people, get advice, get help, get interventions for people to help you. And once you start accepting, once you've accepted your reality, that's when you start embracing yourself. That's when you start embracing your child. So when we've gone through these stages of mourning our fantasies and accepting the situation as it is, we are now at a point where we can truly, I mean, when I say truly, we get to that point where we can truly embrace ourselves as a whole. Not only ourselves, but embracing our children, our kids with special needs, and everything that comes with the journey without questioning. But I said initially at the beginning that grieving, going through grief, it's not a linear process. It doesn't just move from um, mourning the fantasies, accepting, embracing. It is not that straightforward. It is not linear. So sometimes it goes round. Sometimes it goes like a vicious cycle. You may think that you've gotten to that stage of acceptance, or embracing your situation, and then something else happened. You have to go back and start at the beginning. Every development in your child every development in your child may come with its own challenges as well, which at times you have to go back and grieve before actually going back to that stage. So as I said, when we've gone through those stages of mourning our fantasies and accepting the situation as it is, we are now at the point of truly embracing the whole experience, including our kids and everything that comes with the journey. It is also at this stage of embracing that we must have worked on ourselves as parents. We must have worked on our own healing and also understood who we are, embracing not only ours, but our kids' authenticities. Because whenever we are in a place of authenticity where we can just be ourselves, we cannot be exhausted. Yeah, that's true. I can really say this freely with a lot of confidence because I've been through these stages. I'm actually at those stages now. So when we can just be ourselves, when we are not exhausted, we are not ashamed, or we are not afraid to share our experiences, and we don't have to wear masks or to constantly put on different faces to please different people. This is what I call embracing our journey. And this is when I say we are unapologetical, or we are unapologetically special needs parents, where we've gone through those stages of grief. It may be where you are at that point of denial, denying that your child cannot have a disability, your child cannot be the way he or she is. It may have been when you were angry with the doctors for diagnosing your child, and because at some point it feels like they are forcing a diagnosis on you or on your child. It may have been you've gone through those stages, but whenever you find yourself in this situation, make sure you give yourself time to understand what you are going through. Make sure you understand what your child's diagnosis is. Put yourself down and learn and study. It's often said that parents of special needs children usually feel like they are doctors, they are nurses, they are therapists, they are teachers, because those who have gone through those stages, those who have mourned the fantasies of their children, accepted their children and accepted the journey wholeheartedly and embraced the journey, embraced themselves and accepted and embraced their children. They are capable of sitting there or standing there and talking freely, openly, without shame, without fear, because they've gone through all those stages, because they've given themselves time to understand the situation, to learn what their child's diagnosis is all about, how to help their children, who they can rely on to help their children, etc., etc. So, if you are watching and you are a special needs parent, and if at some point you feel like you've been triggered by this conversation, I will advise you to seek further help professionally. I mean it, because there are these little things that we take for granted as special needs parent, but over time, over the years, we may feel stuck at some point. But if you do not understand that these emotions you are experiencing, that this thing that you keep getting stuck at one point, they are stages of grief that you are going through, and you need to seek help. You need to get professional support, or talk to family members, talk to trusted friends, and ask for help. Sometimes we get stuck at some of these stages, especially at the stage of denial, the stage of anger, because maybe we do not have that enough support around us. Maybe we do not have friends to support us, or we do not have family to support us. But at the same time, if you do not tell people, it may not be telling the whole world about your situation, about your experiences. If you do not open up to tell someone what you are struggling with, or to ask for a helping hand. Sometimes people cannot just barge in and they give you a helping hand if they don't know that you need that helping hand. If you are a parent of a child with special needs, autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, etc., etc., and you are struggling, try to look at what area, what aspect is it that you are struggling in. Is it that you need someone to support you with your child? Is it that you are struggling with your own self to accept who you are, to accept your situation, and to stop blaming yourself that your child may be in this situation because of you or because of someone else? Because it's possible that when you are going through this emotions, you're going through these stages of grief, it's possible at some point to blame something or someone. Oftentimes, in a situation where you cannot understand, you cannot accept it, as human beings, we look for something to blame, we look for someone to blame. But at the end of the day, these do not help. But I cannot blame you for grieving the way you are grieving, but make sure your grieving process, grieving your child, is healthy, is heading towards that stage of accepting your reality. It's heading towards that stage of embracing your child, embracing yourself, and saying, this is it. This is my experience. This is my journey. And I am going to be authentically me, unapologetically me, as a parent of a special needs child, with my child the way he or she is, and looking for ways to help him in his struggles, and to help him gain his independence, and help him with his future. Because some of the things that make us fear, that bring in some of the things that bring in that fear when we are going through these stages, is because we cannot predict the future, even to plan. You don't know what the future looks like with your child with special needs. Usually, I tell my friends, especially those who do not have special needs, with special needs children, sometimes they can actually say, okay, in the next 1 year, my child, or in the next 5 years, my child will be in so and so university, or so and so college. But as a parent of a special needs child, it's difficult to predict, it's difficult to tell how it's going to be like. So we rely on hope, we rely on faith, and we try to get more therapy, try to get more help for our children, for ourselves, and for our entire families. So I hope you guys, you've learned something today. And I just thought it's really important for us to go through these stages of grief, because to me, I think like that when you've been given that diagnosis of your child, I think this is some sort of a starting point for every parent. Even, I mean, even teachers. I see here a Sawai chair. She said, um, acceptance starts from the parents. Courage to you and all the parents loving and living with kids. Thank you so much for that. I think she is a special needs teacher, and I also wanted to say that teachers, teachers, or those who support our special needs children, at some point you also have to give yourself time to grieve. You also have to go through those stages of grief for the children you are supporting, for the children you are staging or you are teaching. Because when you see a child, especially when it's an autistic child, and autism being an invisible disability, at the beginning you look at you just look at the child. You cannot really tell whether he can talk or he cannot talk. You cannot tell whether he or she can interact with the others. But first instant, you already have expectations of that child. You already think, oh, this child will be good at this child will be able to talk. this child will be able to interact and do so and so thing. Then by the time you start interacting with that child, the child cannot do what you thought he or she could do. Those were your fantasies. So, as a teacher or as a support worker for our special needs children, at some point in your career or in your life as a teacher, you also have to give yourself time to grieve, mourn the fantasies you had for the children you teach or the children you support. Then you also get to that point where you accept the child the way he is or the way she is, and then you look for ways. And also, looking for ways is trying to understand how the child communicates. It's also trying to understand what has the parent said about the child and what is in the child's care plan for you to be able to support the child. Even doctors, even professionals, sometimes you also have to grieve the child you've been supporting, you've been taking care of for a very long time, for so many years, and at the same time there doesn't seem to be any change over years. I mean, like I was saying, grieving your special needs child, to me, I think it is the foundation. When you've been given that diagnosis, or when you've had that traumatic it may be an accident or brain injury or anything of that sort, or a diagnosis, autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, etc., etc. Grieving your special needs child, I think, is the basis. I think is the foundation for you as a parent to be able to build on. It's going to determine how your journey is going to be from there forward, whether you are going to remain stuck at denial or mourning your fantasies, or still thinking that this is not the child I thought he or she was going to be, or you are going to put yourself down, accept, embrace the situation, and move forward. So, my advice to anyone watching or anyone who will watch later is, as a parent, or if you know a parent of a child with a disability, special needs, and they are struggling, your experience or your knowledge from what you've watched, from what you've listened today, will be able to help them. Just ask, how do you feel about your child, about yourself on a daily basis? And then just give them time to respond. Many parents have approached me and they will say, I feel stuck. I don't know if I'll feel better. I don't know if anything will be better in the next years for my child, or anything of that sort. Many people, many parents have approached me, like I said at the beginning, that they've asked me, how do you do it? How do you manage to put on that smile despite the challenges? Yes, those challenges are there. It was never like that at the beginning, but with time, you learn, you grow, you accept yourself, you embrace yourself, you embrace your journey, you embrace your child wholeheartedly with whatever challenges he comes with, because you must have learned on your coping mechanism. You must have learned some coping mechanisms as well on what you can do, who you can go to for support, etc., etc. Being the parent of a child with special needs and having to go through these stages of grief is not rocket science. As I said, these stages of grief are not linear. Sometimes they go in like in a vicious circle. They go round and round, because at some point you feel like you've gone to that stage. Oh yeah, I've accepted my child is, but you cannot be at that stage of acceptance, or you can't say you've accepted your child. Meanwhile, when something goes wrong, you go back and you start blaming, you start cursing, you start saying, why this, why that, why that. When you are at that stage of acceptance, going back, feeling pity for yourself, not feeling enough, not being adequate. Those things are not supposed to be in your vocabulary anymore when you've gone to that stage of acceptance, and when you've fully embraced your journey, when you've embraced your child, yourself. I mentioned somewhere that as a parent, you also have to work on yourself. You also have to work on your healing. Sometimes we struggle because these traumatic experiences of taking care of your child may have come in addition, or may have come and added to some traumatic experiences you had in the past. And then everything aggravates, everything doubles, triples, even. So at this point, we also have to be very careful. Are you just struggling because you are experiencing or because you are parenting a special needs child, or are you struggling because you have some ungrieved grief in the past? Do you have some traumatic experiences which you have to go back and unpick in order to feel better, in order to be healed, in order to be able to fully accept and embrace this journey, these experiences? We also have to ask ourselves such questions as well, because at times we may be struggling with some grief or some traumatic experiences in the past, and then when if that wasn't sorted, if you didn't seek help or if you didn't get any support, and another traumatic experience adds on top of it, it's not going to be easy. You will struggle more. So we really have to be able to get to that point where we also ask ourselves questions. We also retrospect, we look back and see if there are any things that we need unpicking, that we need to seek help for. It's never too late to seek help. It's never. I mean, grief is not, it's not linear. They always say it comes in waves. So some days you may feel really like I'm a shitty parent. Sorry for my French or whatever. Yeah, some days you feel like you are not enough. You're not doing enough for your child. There are those days. But when those days come, what do you do? Look for those things that make you feel better. What are your coping mechanisms? Some of us parents of special needs children, we do struggle as well because we don't actually know about self-care. I never knew about self-care before. I knew I could just carry on and on and on, and then I will go to bed at night and sleep. That's very dangerous because it affects you in the long run. You need to be able to practice self-care. Anyway, let me not go into that. That would be another topic for another day for special needs parent. But just know that you, as a special needs parent, you also need to be pampered. You need some self care as well. So, to end our show today, I just want to thank each and every one of you. And also, oh, Chia Francis, thank you so much. Yeah, he said good tips there, mommy. Thanks, baby. And I really appreciate you watching. And yeah, and Sawai Che has said again that I agree with you. Teachers need time to grieve. Exactly. I had an experience in the classroom where the kid's shadow had a tantrum and pushed the main teacher who is expecting the baby. Oh my God. I didn't see it coming. So I was so sad with myself and kept asking questions because this wasn't a signal before the behavior happened. Yes, this is exactly what I said, that even teachers of our children with special needs, at some point, they also have to give themselves time to grieve, to be able to mourn the fantasies, go through those fantasies that they thought. Because you just look at a child who has an invisible disability or who doesn't show any signs of aggressive behavior, and then suddenly something happens. You yourself, you will be asking, where did I go wrong? What did I not do right? What is it that I was supposed to do that I didn't do right? Yes, our teachers as well, you also need to give yourself time to grieve, to mourn our children, to mourn those fantasies of our children that you are supporting. So I just want to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you watching today, anyone who tuned in. I really appreciate your time, and to any other person who will watch the video later on. I hope this is going to help, but more especially to our special needs parents out there. Grieving your child with special needs is not grieving the child because he's dead. It's being able to understand those emotions that you are going through when you've been given that diagnosis. Yes, I know while some people are grieving, some will decide to go and seek prayers. Yes, prayers help. We can't leave God out of the equation. But but as you are seeking those prayers, as you are praying to God, also look for those who will help your child. Interventions, therapies, doctors. Yes, do not forget about those. Do not ignore those. And you take your child to Baba, to a juju place, because sometimes we think a child with autism, a child with a disability is a curse. It's something from the God, something that was done to you when no. I said at some point that when you find yourself in this situation, give yourself time to understand what that situation is. If, for example, if you've had the diagnosis of the autism for your child, study. Why not give yourself time and read about autism? While reading about autism, you are also studying your child who is autistic. Yes, you have theory and you have practicals. Your child is the practicals, and reading, studying about it is the theory. So you are doing the two in order to have a better understanding, because no person should know your child better than you, the parent. So I hope this helps. So stay tuned for more here on the Voice of Hope Media. And we've been live for 1 hour, 8 minutes. And I am A. Simbeng, an autism mom, an autism advocate, an autism ambassador in my community. And also I'm an author of a book called Grief to Greet. So it's been a pleasure having you. But before we end our show today, there is this quote which I absolutely love. And it says, "Don't think that there is a different or better child hiding behind the autism or any form of special needs. This, the one in front of you, is your child. As a parent, you have to love the child in front of you. You have to encourage his strengths. You have to celebrate his quirks, and you have to improve his weaknesses the same way you would with any other child. Because when we get stuck so much in that stage of mourning our fantasies, we actually forget. But once you've gone to that stage of acceptance and embracing, we get to that point where you have to say, this is my child. I have to love the child in front of me, have to embrace and encourage his strength, the one that I see physically in front of me, not the one that I thought I was going to have, not the fantasies, not the one that's at the back of your mind that you say, I thought I was going to have a child who is going to be fair in complexion, who is going to be tall, who is going to be speaking for England, who is going to run like Usain Bolt or yes, if you do not have that one you thought you were going to have, and you have the one in your hand, love that one in your hand, accept that one in your hand by encouraging his strength, celebrating his quirks, improving his weaknesses, the same way you would with any child that doesn't have a disability or that doesn't have any form of special needs. So, if you've been watching and you've been triggered in any way with what has been discussed here today, because when discussing these stages of grief for special needs parenting, it can be very emotional. Yes, it can be. So if you've been triggered and you felt emotional at any one point, please seek special support, seek help, professional help, or if you just want to talk to another parent, I am here, AC is here. Connect with me on Facebook, get to me on WhatsApp, and we can talk. Sometimes you just need a listening ear. You just need to talk to someone who says, I get it. I understand what you are going through. I have been there, and I will be able to hold your hand and we go through this journey together. I may not be able to make your child talk or to make your child do the things that you expect he or she to be able to do, but just talking to someone who gets it makes a massive difference. But bear in mind that we have to go through the stages of grief. We have to deal with those emotions that come with the diagnosis of our children in order to avoid getting stuck at what would have been by accepting and embracing what is. Thank you so much. It has been AC here on Let's Give It a Voice, here at the Voice of Hope Media. And see you again next week for another edition of Let's Give It a Voice. So stay tuned and have a good weekend. Bye bye for now.